Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're tackling theories of regionalism.
Ooh, regionalism.
Yeah,
Big word.
it is, and it's a big topic,
Yeah.
especially important for, those of you out there prepping for the UPSC exams.
Sorry.
Anyone facing those international relations questions, this one's for you.
Definitely a cornerstone of international relations. You can't really understand the global scene without understanding the regional dynamics at play.
Right. And it's like we've got these different lenses to look at it through.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to be talking about federalism,
Yes.
functionalism, and neofunctionalism.
You big ones.
They all try to explain how countries decide, you know what, let's team up. Let's form a bloc. Let's work together.
Exactly. And they each offer different sort of explanations or mechanisms for how that happens. What are the driving forces?
Right. So let's start with federalism, because I think this one's maybe the most intuitive, at least at first glance.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about countries coming together to form like a lasting peace,
Right.
aiming for cooperation,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times federalism is the model that comes to mind.
Right. And it's one of the oldest theories, actually. It goes all the way back to thinkers like Hegel and Rousseau.
Wow.
And the core concept here is this idea of pooled sovereignty,
Cool sovereignty.
where states basically decide, okay, we're going to give up a little bit of our individual power to this central authority
Right.
for the benefit of the whole group.
Like a shared potluck.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, where everybody brings their dish and then we all get to enjoy.
Right. So instead of a dish, it's like, economic benefits, maybe increased security,
Yeah.
a stronger voice on the world stage.
Exactly. It's that idea that together we're stronger. A united front can achieve more than a bunch of individual actors going their own way.
Right. And I imagine this, this tension between national sovereignty and giving some of that up for regional integration,
Mm-hmm.
it's got to be a key concept for UPSC prep, right?
Yeah.
That's got to come up all the time.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental tension that underpins a lot of discussions about global governance, whether
Mhm.
we're talking about the UN, the EU, any kind of international organization. This idea of how much are you willing to give up to achieve those collective benefits?
Now, that makes a lot of sense. But federalism, it sounds good in theory, but it's not always a smooth ride, is it?
No, definitely not. I mean, think about it. You're trying to balance the unity of the whole group with the diversity of all these individual members. And
Right.
sometimes those national identities, those national interests, they clash.
They can butt heads a little bit.
Exactly.
Right.
And that can make it really difficult to achieve that full integration that federalism kind of aims for.
Okay, so that's federalism.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about functionalism. Now, this one feels a little bit more grounded, a little bit less utopian,
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we don't have to agree on everything
Mm-hmm.
to just work together on things that benefit everybody.
It's a very practical approach. It's about saying, okay, let's focus on solving specific problems together. And often those problems are technical or economic in nature.
Right. So instead of starting with some grand vision of, a United States of Europe or something,
Yeah.
you're starting with, okay, we've got this very specific problem. Let's figure out how to solve it together.
Yeah. Classic example. Railway gauges in Europe. Back in the day, every country had its own railway gauge, which made transporting goods across borders a nightmare.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So they got together, they standardized the gauges, and suddenly trade became more efficient. It fostered this sense of interconnectedness.
So it's kind of like a form follows function kind of thing.
Exactly. You address a practical need, and the cooperation that emerges from that can spill over into other areas.
Interesting. So you're not aiming for political unity right away.
Not necessarily.
You're focusing on those very practical nuts and bolts collaborations.
Mm-hmm. And the hope is that through that collaboration, you build trust, you build momentum, and maybe down the line that leads to deeper integration. But it's not the primary goal.
Okay, I like it. And listeners, think about it. Where do you see functionalism at play in the world today?
It's everywhere. International air travel, coordinating postal services, managing those transboundary rivers. It's all about finding ways to work together on those practical challenges that affect multiple countries.
Right. So functionalism sounds great.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there are some downsides, right? I mean, if it were that easy to achieve regional integration just by cooperating on practical stuff, wouldn't we have world peace by now?
Well, there are always challenges. States can be hesitant to cede control in areas that are seen as politically sensitive.
Like,
Security defense, those core areas of national sovereignty, functional cooperation might build trust on practical matters, but it doesn't always translate into that deeper political integration or a shared sense of identity.
right. So we can agree on how to deliver the mail across borders, But that doesn't mean we're ready to, merge our armies.
Exactly, and that's where our third theory comes in, neofunctionalism.
Okay, hit me with it.
This one is kind of like functionalism 2.0. It acknowledges those limitations you just pointed out. It recognizes that simply working together on practical stuff doesn't always magically lead to everyone holding hands singing Kumbaya.
So it's a little more realistic.
I think so. Neo-functionalists, they really emphasize this idea of the spillover effect,
Spillover effect. Okay.
where cooperation in one area kind of creates this pressure, this momentum for further integration in related fields.
So give me an example.
Sure, imagine countries start cooperating on something like coal and steel production.
Okay.
Mm.
Seems pretty basic.
Right. But as they do that, they might start harmonizing their regulations. Then they realize, hey, it would be a lot easier if we had a common currency to facilitate trade, and then suddenly they're coordinating on foreign policy.
So one thing leads to another, and it just kind of snowballs.
Exactly. It's like those dominoes falling one after the other. And the European Union is often cited as like the poster child for neo-functionalism.
Right. I can see that. Starting with coal and steel, and look at them now.
Right. But it's important to remember that the EU is a very specific case, born out of that unique historical context of post-war Europe.
Right.
We can't just assume that this model will work everywhere.
And that's where it gets really interesting for our UPSC folks, right? Because you can't just apply these theories like cookie cutters.
Absolutely.
You'd have to analyze each region's specific context.
Yeah.
The motivations of the states involve the historical baggage they bring to the table.
You got it. And that's actually where the limitations of these very Eurocentric theories become really apparent. They provide valuable frameworks for thinking about integration, but they don't capture the full complexity of what's going on in other parts of the world.
Okay, so we've talked about Europe a lot, but what about regionalism in, the rest of the world? The world's a big place. It's not all croissants and the euro.
You're right. We need to consider how factors like decolonization, for example, economic development, cultural ties, these all influence how regionalism plays out in different ways.
I mean, are these theories even useful for understanding what's happening in, say, Africa or Asia? I mean, they're based on the European experience.
That's a great question. And it's one that UPSC examiners love to ask because it forces you to think critically about the theories and their applicability. So while those theories might have originated in the West,
Right.
they can still offer valuable insights. It's about adaptation and application.
Okay, so it's like we've got this toolbox, right?
Right.
With different tools.
Yeah.
You gotta know which tool is right for the job.
Exactly.
And sometimes you might even need to modify a tool or invent a new one altogether to really understand what's going on.
And that's where those analytical skills come in, especially for those UPSC exams. You need to be able to go beyond just describing the theories.
Yeah.
You need to show that you can apply them to real-world situations. Critically analyze their strengths and weaknesses, draw comparisons between different regional blocks.
Now that's what I call a deep dive. Listeners, are you starting to see how these theories can help you make sense of what's happening in the world? How all these pieces fit together? We'll be right back after a short break to explore how you can use these frameworks to craft those killer responses for your UPSC exams and develop a deeper understanding of regional dynamics around the world.
And we'll touch upon some fascinating examples of regional organizations outside of Europe as well, exploring their unique challenges and achievements.
So don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a flash. Okay, so we're back, and my brain is buzzing with all these regionalism theories.
Good. It's good to have those gears turning.
It is, but now I'm thinking, okay, how do we actually use these theories to, analyze real-world events?
Yeah.
Especially for our UPSC folks out there. How does this translate into those brilliant essay responses that examiners love?
Well, the key is to remember those examiners. They're not just looking for you to, parrot back definitions.
Yeah.
They want to see that you can apply these concepts to real-world scenarios, analyze them critically, draw comparisons.
So not just textbook knowledge, but actually thinking like an international relations pro.
Exactly. So, for example, let's say you're tackling an essay question at the African Union.
Okay.
A sharp UPSC aspirant could analyze the AU through that neo-functionalist lens we talked about, examining how, that initial cooperation in areas like trade or infrastructure could lead to those spillover effects. Maybe even pushing the AU towards greater political integration down the line.
That's smart. But wouldn't it be important to also talk about the challenges the AU faces? Africa's got a very different history than Europe.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's where that critical analysis comes in. A savvy UPSC aspirant would acknowledge those challenges. The diversity of the member states, the legacy of colonialism, the economic disparities, and they discuss how those factors might actually hinder the AU's progress towards deeper integration.
So you're not just saying, hey, neofunctionalism explains everything. We're looking at the nuance.
Exactly. And to take it even further, you could compare the AU with other regional blocs like ASEAN in Southeast Asia or Mercosur in South America.
Okay, I like it.
What are the key differences in their approaches to integration? What factors have contributed to their successes or struggles? It's all about making those connections.
Okay, so you're not just name-dropping theories. You're
Yeah.
using them as tools
Exactly.
to actually dissect and compare
Yeah.
these real organizations,
Yeah.
highlighting both their potential and their limitations. Now, that is impressive.
And that's the kind of analysis that really makes those UPSC examiners sit up and take notice. It shows you can think critically, connect the dots, and go beyond just a surface-level understanding.
This is gold for our UPSC listeners.
Yeah.
But honestly, this stuff, it's not just for exams, right? I mean, understanding these theories of regionalism, it helps you understand the world around you, no matter what you do.
Totally. It's about seeing the patterns in global politics, understanding the motivations of different countries and actors, and being able to sort of anticipate how those regional dynamics might play out on a larger scale.
It's like having a decoder ring for the news.
Kind of. It helps you make sense of those complex events. You know, why certain countries are allies, why trade wars happen. It's all connected.
Okay, so we talked about how these theories, they're rooted in that European experience, but they can be adapted and applied to other regions. But we got to be mindful of their limitations, right?
Absolutely. We can't just slap these theories onto other contexts without considering the unique historical, political, and cultural factors at play. Each region has its own story to tell.
It's like, you've got all these puzzle pieces from different boxes.
Yeah.
You can't just force them together.
Hmm.
You need to examine each piece carefully, understand its shape, its color, where it might fit.
What's so fascinating is how these theories, while they're valuable, they can't fully explain the complexities of regional integration in every single context. We need to consider those historical factors, political dynamics, economic interests, and even cultural differences. All of these things shape how regionalism plays out.
So it's about using those theories as a starting point,
Yep.
not the end point,
Yeah.
for a deeper analysis.
For sure.
So for our listeners, especially those UPSC aspirants, don't just memorize the definitions. Think about how these theories play out in the real world. Look at the successes and failures of different regional blocs.
Yeah.
Ask yourself why things happened the way they did.
And don't be afraid to challenge the conventional wisdom. The study of international relations is constantly evolving. New theories emerge, old ones get refined. Our understanding of the world deepens. It's a dynamic field.
It is. It's exciting. It's constantly changing. And it's about more than just analyzing, structures and institutions.
Yeah.
We need to consider the human element as well.
Absolutely. The role of culture, shared values, historical ties. Sometimes these things can be even more powerful than economic or political incentives.
Right. Think about the role of shared language or religion
Yeah.
or historical connections. These can really grease the wheels of regional cooperation.
They can. But on the flip side, those cultural differences, they can also create tensions and conflicts within a region.
Right. It's a constant balancing act.
It is. And it raises a really interesting question. What is the ultimate goal of regionalism? Is it simply about, economic cooperation and political stability? Or is there a deeper aspiration towards a shared sense of identity and common purpose?
Ooh, that's a big one. Is regionalism ultimately about building a true regional community that goes beyond just practical cooperation?
No.
There's something to ponder.
It is. And it's something that policymakers and scholars grapple with all the time. There's no easy answer. But it's a question worth asking as we try to understand this constantly evolving idea of regionalism in our increasingly complex world.
Now, I'm thinking back to what you said earlier about, examiners wanting to see that you can apply these theories to real-world situations. What would be a good example of that? Can you give us another scenario, maybe something specific to a particular region?
Sure. Let's take ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Okay.
A student could use that concept of functionalism we discussed to analyze how ASEAN's early focus on economic cooperation was a way to build trust and reduce tensions between member states. They have different political systems, historical baggage.
Yeah, makes sense. So there's, you're sure they understand how that functionalist approach played a role in ASEAN's development.
Exactly. But of course, a truly insightful essay would also address the limitations of that approach.
Right, because ASEAN has been criticized for its lack of political cohesion and its, reluctance to address sensitive issues like human rights.
Exactly. And that's where that critical analysis comes in again. A strong essay response would acknowledge those limitations. Maybe even argue that while functionalism might have been effective in the early stages, it's become insufficient for tackling the more complex political and social challenges facing the region today.
So they're showing they can apply the theory, analyze its strengths and weaknesses in a specific context, and maybe even offer potential solutions or alternative approaches. This is like a masterclass in crafting those killer UPSC responses.
It is. But remember this kind of analysis. It's not just about acing exams.
Right.
It's about developing a deeper understanding of how the world works, the forces that shape international relations, and how those forces play out in different regions.
It's about becoming a more informed and engaged citizen, equipped with the knowledge and the critical thinking skills to navigate this complex, interconnected world of ours.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So listeners, we've really journeyed through this whole world of regionalism, right? All those theories and how they actually play out in the world.
Yeah, we've gone from federalism to functionalism to neofunctionalism. We've seen how those concepts can help us understand what's going on with organizations like the EU, the AU, and ASEAN.
And of course, for all of our UPSC preppers out there, we've shown you how you can use this knowledge to really craft those top-notch essay responses.
The kind that make examiners happy.
Exactly, because it's not just about memorizing definitions, right? It's about showing that you can use those concepts to analyze real situations, compare different cases, and really show off those critical thinking skills.
It's about going deeper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's say you get an essay question about the future of regionalism and how it's going to deal with all those big global challenges, climate change, pandemics, things like that.
Those are the big ones these days.
They are. So
Yeah.
you could actually use that concept of neofunctionalism to argue that those challenges might actually push countries towards deeper integration.
It's that spillover effect
Yep.
in action.
Right. Because they're realizing, hey, we can't tackle these huge problems alone. We need to work together.
Exactly. And in that essay, you could even bring in some of the other theories we discussed, like functionalism.
Okay, I like it.
You could talk about how practical cooperation on things like scientific research or disaster management could actually lay the groundwork for closer political ties down the road.
So you're showing you understand multiple theories, and you can weave them together to build a really solid argument.
It's all about showing that you can think like an international relations expert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? This isn't just for those taking exams. This is about understanding how the world works. And for everyone out there, keep those brains buzzing, keep learning, and keep those deep dives going. Because understanding these regional dynamics, it's not just about acing tests. It's about being an informed and active citizen in our increasingly interconnected world.
It's about making sense of this big, complicated world we live in. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more explorations of all those fascinating, complex topics. From history and science to culture and politics, we're here to help you cut through the noise and understand what's really going on.
We'll see you next time.